Hello and welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're making Long John Silver's chicken. So if you want to call it Long John Silver's chicken or Tempura Chicken, it's pretty much the same thing. It's basically cut up chicken with a batter which you're going to fry. So what we're going to do is take 4 chicken breast and we're going to cut all the fat pieces off of it, all the pieces that you really don't want to eat because there's edges you do want to cut off of this. As you can see in the video, I'm taking off bits of it. And then when you get this done, you're going to cut it in sizable pieces which you're going to fry up as your chicken bits. So go ahead and cut them into pieces and put them into a bowl to the side so that way when we're ready, they will be ready for us to use. As you can see on the pieces I'm cutting up, they're decent length. They're like, a few inches, maybe 2 to 3, and they're not terribly thick. Because the better it is like to cook them smaller, because if you do large pieces, the breading doesn't work so well. It kind of cooks off, or sometimes it's hard to cook it completely through. So you want to keep them to smaller pieces, or unless they're long pieces like a tender that is thin but it can be lengthy that way. You just don't want really fat pieces. So go ahead and cut up all of your chicken and cut them into bits. One tip on cutting chicken, and it might be a little bit easier for you, is if you had chicken that was frozen and you've thawed it, if you do not thaw it completely, it's easier to cut it into pieces like this. Like it's on the verge of being completely thawed, but just a little off from it. That will help you do that. And you can always sit it in the fridge to let it finish thawing after you've cut it up a bit if it's completely frozen. But it's easier sometimes when the chicken is a little bit more stiff and sturdy to cut it that way. So go ahead and keep cutting and get everything cut up. One hint for this when you're doing this, it's always easy to use breast or even chicken tenders to do this, just for the fact that any other piece of meat, you're going to have to take it off a bone or something. It's really not going to work well, especially dark meat doesn't work well with this for me. So I found it's always easy just to get a tender or a breast and cut it up. It always does a good job. So while you're finishing up with your chicken, it might be a good time to go ahead and get a pan and your cooking oil. You're going to put in your pan at least a couple inches of cooking oil, but you're going to heat the temperature to 350 degrees. You can use a thermometer to check this, and that's going to be ready for you when you're ready, because we're not all that far away from doing this. So in another bowl, you're going to add 2 cups of flour. To that, you're going to add 1.5 cups of water. Into that, you're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and then you want to mix this up a bit. So that way it's good, like a little bit of a wet batter. Go ahead and scrape your sides, make sure everything is pulled into it. You don't want this extremely watery. You're going to actually, if you think it's wet when you're doing it, add a little bit of flour to it to thicken it up. You can always do that all the way up to the last step before you dip the chicken in, just to make sure it's thick enough to stick to the chicken. And make sure you don't have any lumps of flour in there, so just break them up with your spoon and keep stirring. Now we're going to take 3 tablespoons of vinegar and add that to 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, and you're going to get a foamy reaction as you're about to see it pour into my bowl. And this is going to give it a little bit of a kick when it's fluffing up when it's cooking. Stir that in, and then once your oil is ready and heated, we're going to dip our chicken into this piece by piece and then place it into the hot oil. So if your oil is hot enough, you can go ahead and do what I'm doing by adding the first piece to it. So literally all you do is take the chicken, dip it down into it, coat it. Once it's all the way around, you might want to tap it on the side of the bowl a little bit to get any excess off, and then bring it straight to your frying pan. Once you have these in, you're going to want to cook these for at least 5 minutes. And while you're doing this, you want to make sure you flip them from time to time so that way the top is getting cooked as much as the bottom, because you know all your heat's kind of below. So flip them around. If you have to flip them a couple times, that's fine. I usually do it 2 to 3 times, but make sure you cook them for at least 5 minutes to get the chicken completely cooked inside. Now, if you don't want to do this in a frying pan, you can do it in a deep fryer. You can do it in a big pot or whatever you want to use. It's your choice. As long as you get the temperature of your oil up to at least 350, you're fine on whatever you put it into. Just a reminder though, if you're using something that is not non-stick, sometimes these things, they rest a little close to the bottom, they could stick to it. So make sure your surface isn't going to pull off whatever batter you put on the bottom. I always move mine around a bit to make sure they don't stick. And that is a wise choice, because once they do stick, it will rip it right off the chicken. So make sure that, you know, you're careful about what you're doing with that. So as you can see with mine, they are cooking quite well. You can see them bubbling away in the oil, and the batter is starting to plump up. That's what you want to see, because that is part of what the baking soda and vinegar were doing. They were making your batter to a state where it can plump up in the oil and cook, and you know, it just gets kind of fluffy on the outside. And then what you're going to get is a crispy outside, but the inside of it has a batter to it where it's cooked through all the way to the chicken, but it has a great taste inside of it, and has a little bit of a vinegary taste, but it's really cool. So as you can see, continue flipping the chicken as you keep going, and you can see it's starting to brown, and that's what you want to see. Just a reminder, be careful of your oil when you're using it. You do not want to put your hands too close to bubbling oil. It might pop up and burn you. So be careful of that. And use something you can reach in to turn the chicken or pick them up with that has a little distance from the oil, so that way you don't have a problem. I use tongs. I had one thing that I was using that you basically, it's a scoop that you pick things up out of oil. Any of these things work really well, and it keeps your hands safe so you do not burn yourself. And this is what it looks like when it's done, and this is a great thing to make at home, and a lot cheaper than what you would pay if you went to Long John Silver's, because their prices are extremely high. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.